You are listening to the Geekly Chronicles.
One of the things that I've always loved is independent films, films that are, really made by people who are passionate about stuff, where the motivation isn't, being a giant Hollywood studio and making lots of money. And I know it's something that you love as well, Chris. And
this is true.
We, alongside the Geekly Chronicles, have done plenty of work around some of those things. And one of the podcasts that I listen to quite often is UK Scriptwriters Podcast, and the people who run that podcast have also created a film recently that was kickstarted. The film is called Who Killed Nelson Nutmeg, and I went to see it, and it's absolutely sensational. But my words will not do it justice, so I'm going to bring up the phone now, and hopefully we have Danny on the line with us, our guest for this evening. Hello, Danny.
Hello there.
How are you doing today?
I'm very well, thanks. Yeah, thanks for having me on. It's very exciting.
Oh, thanks for joining us. So I just introduced you a little bit there, but really I'd been following along your podcast for a while, but I first got really interested in the stuff you were doing with the film Who Killed Nelson Nutmeg. Can you give for our listeners who maybe haven't seen it, can you give us a brief kind of synopsis? What's the film about?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Nelson Nutmeg, the titular character, he's a kind of a 6-foot squirrel mascot at a kind of summer camp. And at this summer camp, 4 kids kind of meet regularly there on their summer holidays. So they think they're too old for the camp now, and they think they're too old for Nelson Nutmeg. But one night, one of the kids thinks they see Nelson arguing with someone on top of the cliffs, and gets pushed off, and thinks Nelson falls to his death. And so she tries to tell her parents, and she tries to tell the owners, but nobody believes her. And so she convinces her friends to kind of go out and find out who killed Nelson Nutmeg.
Ah, so it's kind of a whodunit, but with a squirrel.
Exactly that, yeah. But a kid's whodunit, harking back to when films like this used to be made on a regular basis, which is kind of in the 70s and 80s. I mean, even if you think back to something like The Goonies, we wanted to get something going with that kind of vibe, something with kids in the lead roles, and just getting out there, having fun and having adventures. And where we filmed it and where we're from, down in Bournemouth and Dorset, it's got strong connections down here with the Famous Five and things like that. So we just thought, well, let's do a kind of a Famous Five by way of Scooby-Doo, by way of Goonies, for whatever we can afford, and just have some fun, really.
Well, and you mentioned having kids in the starring role, which is great, and that we haven't really seen films like this for a few decades.
Yeah.
It's which is a shame, because having seen the film, it's incredible and really gripping and engaging, and shows off how great and talented young people can be as well. But I mean, it just seems like there's such a push for kind of high octane, high action films that are maybe not as relatable to people as something like meeting up with some friends on a holiday camp and going on an adventure would be.
Yeah.
I mean, why do you think we've got less of that kind of relatable stuff now? Well,
I think Hollywood films and kind of box office, international box office, it's all a kind of high-stakes business. So when kind of they make family films, they want them to be guaranteed to be a success. So things like Harry Potter or Nanny McPhee, they're based on pre-existing properties, books or comics or games or whatever, and it's an easier thing to do, but and they put in a lot of money. But we were like, there should be original stories. It shouldn't be just based on books and things, and also we shouldn't just be reliant on Hollywood or even Pixar, because Pixar kind of reinvented the animation genre for a bit. And now it's, so family films are actually big business, but we kind of rely on Hollywood, Pixar, or kind of big budget adaptations of things. And we just think there could be a market, or there should be a invigoration of the genre just in this country to get something back that's more culturally relevant, diverse characters that people could relate to and connect with, from all around the country. we're not even making this film as a stepping stone genre to something else. We want to make more of these films and really champion the family film genre back to the UK. I mean, great. Coming up later in the summer, there's a film called Swallows and Amazons coming out. But, that's a remake, and it's based on a book and stuff. But we're excited about it because it's got kids in the lead roles pretty much. But again, if you try to make that as an original idea, you'd be struggling probably.
No, I saw a trailer for that film, Swallows and Amazons. It looks fantastic.
Yeah.
It does look very good. It's got some fairly big names in it as well, which is obviously slightly more Hollywood. I think does it have one of the actresses in it that you had in your film as well? I seem to see a familiar face in the trailer. I could be mistaken though.
I don't think so. Funnily enough, though, one of the kids in our film did get a role in Game of Thrones.
Oh, really?
While we were filming Nelson Nutmeg, so it kind of messed around our schedule a little bit. But it was very exciting for her and for us as well, because it was a fairly prominent role for a few episodes. And what we love about our kids as well, that in the film, I mean, we cast locally down in Bournemouth, so they're all local actors. A couple of them had never acted before. Two of them we found on a big open audition day. And so we were just really kind of pleased and proud that we kept everything pretty much local. Cast, crew, all the great locations we have down here. I mean, Kez, you've seen the film. It doesn't look cheap, does it? It looks pretty awesome because of where it's set along the Jurassic coastline.
Yeah.
And so we just tried to milk everything for what we could, really.
I mean, everything about the film felt really high quality, and I think that's one of the things that really inspired me about it. That you don't necessarily have to be a Hollywood film to make something look great, and you don't necessarily have to use green screens and special effects to make things engaging. I mean, there was one particular bit in the film where you have someone climbing down a cliff. And I suppose it would have been so easy to green screen that, but you didn't, did you? How did you do that? How did you effectively throw an 11-year-old off a cliff?
That
was
great. That was really exciting, actually. I mean, we going into the production, we didn't want to do any fancy visual effects, and obviously because we're pretty low budget, we just kind of wrote things that we could achieve. So with the character of Woody kind of being lowered down the cliff on a rope. We found a spot on the cliff that, with a little bit of depth perception or, it kind of, when he starts to go down, it looks like he's actually going over. And then the rest is just clever kind of shots and editing. And then it just works really well. And even the kids who were there in the scene, when they watched it back, they convinced themselves that they really did it. And you have to remind them saying, it was perfectly safe and everything was all right. I mean, we were supposed to have a stuntman, actually, just to kind of help out for that day. And he couldn't make it in the end. And the guy who plays Woody was really worried. He goes, oh, my God, where's my stuntman? Am I going to fall? But then he was just like, he couldn't get enough of it in terms of going over that ledge and stuff. So it was all really good fun. And, I mean, as you say, it looks pretty realistic.
It does. And talking about, you got local actors and, you did that kind of call for casting, and it's fantastic. You did also have a Hollywood actress in the film, though, as well, right? You had Ginny Weasley.
Ginny Weasley from Harry Potter, Bonnie Wright, which was brilliant because, well, we wanted to get somebody in the film that people would recognize and would maybe give it a bit of credibility. And also, just on the practical side of things, help sell the film, so that it wasn't just a bunch of people that you didn't hear or you never heard of. So we got Bonnie, and because she's playing the villain as well, we thought that might kind of appeal to her. And we have to say, fair dues to her agent, because we contacted Bonnie's agent and said we were doing this low-budget family film where there would be hardly any money in it for Bonnie, and that means hardly any money for the agent. But the agent said, send me through the script and I'll pass it on. So we were very grateful for that. And then Bonnie read it and said, I'll chat to the guys. So we had a Skype with her, and she saw that we weren't too crazy. And she said, "Okay, I'll do it if you can make it work for my schedule." So she came down on the last week of filming, and by herself, being picked up in Dorchester Station by Tim, the co-director. She really, just let herself open to the whole process. She really got on with the crew. She was a big inspiration for the kids. I mean, she grew up on the Harry Potter set, so she was really, it was great. She just brought an extra bit of class and professionalism to everything. So we were just thrilled to have her. She was great.
And you say that she was an inspiration to the kids in the. I mean, how many kids did you actually have in the film? I mean, I know the main characters, but there were lots of extras and people around. What was the cast like?
Yeah, there was the main gang of 5. Well, four. The main gang of 4 kids plus the older brother, so that makes 5. And then the rest of the kids were people who we met in the audition process, who we didn't think were suitable for the main roles, but they had just had something about them that we thought we'd use, and if they wanted to be extras, and some of them then got a few lines. If you remember, there's a fun interrogation sequence where the character of the colonel interrogates some of the kids around the camp, so that was fun. They all really enjoyed that. And then we got anybody that was local down in Bridport, where we shot mainly, who wanted to be involved. So there was a good maybe dozen extra kids that we kind of used in a cycle. So when you see one kid in one scene, you'll definitely see them later on being used again. But that was really great, and it kind of worked out really well. So yeah. But again, just going back to the fantastic talent that's in the area, once you start to kind of really noodle it out, as it were, just really kind of do the search.
I think a lot of people that would think about writing for TV and film veer away from thinking about writing not necessarily writing for kids, but writing for things that have young people in it, because I think there is the perception of there being a lot of barriers, making sure that you're not overworking people. Is the quality going to be good? Are people going to be professional enough?
It's the old Hollywood adage, isn't it? Never work with children or animals. Well,
and that can't be right, because, the people have to get into the industry somewhere, and the kids in this film were amazingly talented. So, what would you say to those people that say never work with children or animals?
Well, never work with kids or animals. We worked with kids in a 6-foot kind of squirrel, so we were kind of really pushing our luck. But
doing both.
The kids were really professional. We did spend about 4 months in the casting process, so we were quite careful and thorough. And so by the time we were ready to shoot, everybody was pretty much a tight-knit gang, and we were all having good fun off screen. And what was really interesting was, because they're children, their brains kind of just are able to soak up information very quickly. So even like 5 minutes before shooting a scene, we would maybe do some rehearsal with them, and they wouldn't know their lines, and that would kind of frustrate us. But then 5 minutes later, when it was due to film, they'd have learned their lines so quickly.
Wow.
And the restricted hours in terms of that you have with children, the good old child labour laws kind of thing, that was actually a useful kind of parameter in a way for us, because it kind of ensured that all of us were doing everything that we should, rather than getting delayed or lagging behind. So really, the kids didn't really delay anything at all with the process, either with their acting or with the production. And it worked out fantastic. So we're either really, really lucky, because in our next film we do have a dog, and so we're anticipating that might be a bit more tricky.
Possibly not as quick to learn the lines.
Exactly, yeah.
No, but do you think the dog is going to be as easy to work with as the squirrel?
I think the dog will probably have a better Winnebago, as they say, a little makeup trailer for itself than the other cat. But we'll see.
So, moving away from Nelson Nutmeg for a minute, you also run the UK Scriptwriters podcast as well.
Yeah.
And the feeling that I get certainly from the podcast and the stuff you've done with the work of yours that I've seen, there's a real sense of community, kind of giving back to the community and being part of a community as well. But I think perception, certainly for a lot of people that are newly getting into writing scripts, whether it's for television or radio or theatre or film, it is that it's very cutthroat, that it's very, hold your cards close to your chest and don't share those ideas because people might steal them or critique them. Or, I mean, what's your experience of that? Do you feel like it's a community or is it a Shark Tank?
Well, it can be a mixture of both, but luckily I think there's a real kind of positive writing and filmmaking community out there, especially with the way the internet has kind of developed, what with Twitter and social media and things like that. If you kind of follow or connect with the right people, you'll always have a kind of an endless resource of either information or support. And I remember, I was starting out pretty much around 20 years ago, and as a writer and not knowing anybody and the internet really hadn't taken off in the way that it is now, and you just feel lonely and you feel isolated and you feel like the industry might be a bit of a Shark Tank. But then, everything that I've done in terms of, as you say, building that community is just things that I think would be helpful or things that I would have loved myself when I was starting out. So, even setting up a writing competition or setting up a writing blog that I did and just sharing information about what I was learning and my experiences as a new writer, as well as the amount of script reading I was doing. And then you just get into conversations with people and you become friends. And I think that's pretty much what happened with myself and Tim Clegg, he kind of runs the podcast with me, and we made Nelson Nutmeg together. And I think if we weren't of the same like-minded kind of personalities of just kind of wanting to do stuff, but also wanting to share and support others, I don't think we would have even collaborated or made even Nelson Nutmeg or done the podcast. But now we're working together even more, and we're going to make another family film, and things are looking to go from strength to strength, really.
Oh, that's amazing, and it's fantastic to hear about the community aspect to things as well.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm be keen to hear about your motivation and what really got you into writing as well, because it's a thing of passion for me, certainly, and a lot of the writing that I do. It's something that I just love, and that's storytelling. But I think there's a perception again that you do stuff like that to get into Hollywood, and it's glamorous, and it's full of rich people. And I don't know about you, but I've not met in person any actually rich writers.
No.
The ones that are rich and famous don't tend to go to the same coffee shops that I do. So
yeah, you're certainly not doing it for the money. Which, I mean, there can be good money in it, especially if you write regularly for TV and things. And as you say, there's good money in Hollywood, but you don't pursue it, or you don't want to become a writer for the money. If you do, then that's the wrong kind of starting point, and maybe rethink your priorities. But it's interesting when you ask somebody, what inspired you to become a writer. It's such a tough question to answer, and it's something that I think about a few times and come up with different answers to. But I just think back to my childhood, I think, in terms of just being really inspired and enthralled by not just TV and cinema, but just story in general, and knowing that there was something magical and special about story, and then that a writer as well was almost like that special person who held all the kind of magic ingredients, I guess. And that's something that always kind of appealed to me. And then as I kind of made my way out into the world, as it were, and you kind of get a job, and there's just something nagging at you in the back of your mind saying, I've got to write. And then I remember when I made the decision, right, I'm going to be a full-time writer, just very boldly, I just said, right, I'm giving up my job and I'm going to become a writer, because I just knew I had to give it a really full and proper go, rather than think, I regret my time now because I never really tried it. But, I gave up my job and I dived into the process, and it still takes a while. There's not an immediate return. The thing about writing is nobody has asked you to write, and no one really cares, unfortunately. But you'll get some support from friends and family and things. But that motivation to write must come from your passion for story, I guess, and just to keep on going as well when times look tough or you get rejected.
Yeah. It can be quite a leap of faith, can't it, to just get started with writing specifically full time, but in general to kind of to have the motivation to get the ideas flowing, because that really, like you say, it can't come from anywhere else. So it can be quite scary to just say, right, I'm going to do this, and then the ideas don't flow immediately, and then you think, oh God, what have I done?
Exactly.
But
I mean,
you can easily,
sorry.
Yeah, I was going to say, you can easily convince yourself that there isn't time to write. I mean, people do have busy schedules and busy jobs and busy lives, but everybody has the same amount of time in the day, and writers, whatever their position in terms of, they could be working in a day job and have 5 kids or whatever it is. Writers who want to write will always find that time somewhere. And so there's no excuses now. You just, if you want to write, you got to find the time, and there'll be nothing stopping you. Nobody's asked you to write, but nobody can tell you that you shouldn't write. So you just got to crack on.
That's it's really great advice, and certainly I know that in spite of having a day job and a radio show and a bunch of other things to do, I still find the time to sit down and write, and I get very sad if I don't have a chance. I kind of get that itching to make the time to do it. But would you? Great. I mean, do you have any advice for anyone that's maybe sat there thinking, okay, yeah, I'd love to be a full-time writer. I'd love to give up my day job and do that. That's amazing. But, money and security and, everything's scary.
Yes. Well, I mean, first of all, it's very exciting, and I'm envious in terms of the potential that's ahead of anybody who's just kind of starting and has that urge. My number one bit of advice was, don't do what I did, which was give up the day job. And unless you really want that big kind of push and behind you to kind of really do something,
because you kind of have to do it if you do that.
You kind of have to do it. There's nothing else, and you have to find some way to pay the bills. But I would say, make sure you don't be afraid to start. As in, if it's a script, if it's a book, if it's a short story, if it's anything, just don't be afraid to start. And then once you've started, absolutely make sure that you finish it, because that's the number one thing. A lot of people start stories and then never finish for whatever reason. It could be lack of confidence. It could have been time distractions or whatever. But, people get ideas and they start and then they might fizzle out. So it's just like, once you start, which is great, then make sure you finish, because when you've finished it, you've got something, and you've got something you can either rewrite and make better, or you've got something that could be, in a good position for you to send to a producer or an agent or a publisher or whatever it is that you've written. Nothing happens unless you start, and then nobody wants to read anything if it's not finished. So just start and finish. That's the main two things.
And I'm keen to hear your thoughts on things like self-publishing. Because obviously, kind of going back to Nelson Nutmeg, you didn't kind of get that script commission through a film studio or anything like that. You crowdfunded. No. You went ahead and you did that. And a lot of people will be thinking, well, I'm interested in writing. I'm also interested in producing and casting and owning that whole process. I mean, would you have any advice for anyone that, or certainly any thoughts around, self-publishing versus going through publishers for books or film studios for film and that kind of thing?
Well, that's really good, because nowadays you can pretty much do anything thanks to the internet, and self-publishing can be a really good way of getting your work out there and even getting more attention than you thought you were ever going to get, or more success. I mean, even something like The Martian, that film with what's his name? The Bourne Identity guy. Matt Damon. That started off as a blog. He was putting out the book as a chapter by blog, and he ended up self-publishing, and then it's a major Hollywood film. So I think if you're interested in self-publishing, if you're interested in making a film, there are ways that you can just dive in and learn and kind of do everything yourself. But I think anything big, a big project like a feature film, I think it's great if you have a little team. You know, there was myself and Tim to begin with, and then we kind of gathered a little team of about 6 people to kind of help us, and that really helped kind of just get the momentum going. So things that you don't know about or you're unsure in terms of certain areas that might be weak for you, or you just don't know how it works, somebody else will know and they'll help you. And it just makes sure that everything keeps going, really. Because there's no way I would have made Nelson Nutmeg by myself, I don't think. I would have struggled a hell of a lot more. So having that team, or having people that you trust that you can go to and collaborate with, or even just asking for help is not a bad thing, just as long as you've maintained momentum.
Lovely. Well, I mean, thank you so much for some really great words. I know that we've had some people in our chat room saying they're really enjoying this interview. So thank you for being on the show.
I've been making notes.
Yes, there we go. But
awesome.
Just before we go, let's kind of go back to Nelson Nutmeg. I mean, I was so impressed with the film when I went to see it. I'm not saying that to make you blush. I mean, I thought the acting was superb. The soundtrack was inspired. I think the whole thing was brilliant.
Yeah.
How can our listeners see this great film? I mean, I went along to a screening that was like an hour and a half's drive away just because it was a day that I happened to be free. But we've got listeners from around the globe. How and when can these people see Nelson Nutmeg?
Well, for those in America, if you've got listeners in America, it's actually going to be out on video on demand on the 24th of June. So you'll be able to watch it on Netflix and Amazon and iTunes and all those kind of usual places. So we're very excited about that.
Fantastic.
In the UK at the moment, it's in cinemas, but only in kind of selected cinemas nationwide. It's been on a mini cinema tour. So it's next on in Aberdeen and Edinburgh on the 2nd and 3rd of July, and then it's going to be in Manchester, I think, in September, on the 24th and 25th of September. We might have a few other public screenings. There's more film festival screenings lined up here and there, but then we will be kind of arranging the UK video on demand / DVD release probably later in the summer or in the autumn. So anybody who wants to keep up to date, they should just kind of visit the website, which is nelsonnutmeg.com. You can sign up to kind of get updates, or just check the website for trailers and news and things like that. But yeah, everything's kind of out there now, but everything is also coming soon. So yeah, it's great.
Fantastic. And I know we've got some listeners up in Scotland, so hopefully they'll be able to make one of those screenings soon.
I look forward to seeing it when it comes to Netflix and similar on-demand services.
Yeah,
I live in none of those places.
Yes, well, I certainly can't wait to be able to Netflix and Nutmeg. So
nice.
There's a hashtag right there.
It's the Geekly Chronicles.